teacher, writer, dancer, filmmaker, and a visual and performance artist. She has a PhD in creative writing from the University of Denver and was a Kundiman Fellow and a Fulbright Scholar. She has 2 books, This Human and Ik. Did I say that right? Yes, okay. As well as 2 films, Dogana Chapti, and which was an official selection at Frameline 43 and the Oregon Documentary Film Festival and Seattle Queer Film Festival, and Mother Ghosting from 2018. She was a featured artist in Harper's Bazaar, India, as well as in Denver Westward's 100 Colorado Creatives. She has recent publications in Sync, Foglifter, and Matters of Feminist Practice. Serena is Associate Professor of Creative Writing at Seattle University and teaches at Lighthouse Writers Workshop. You can find out more at serenachopra.com. Next up, Laci M Johnson. Laci is a Houston-based professor, curator, activist, and is author of the essay collection, The Reckonings from 2018, the memoir, The Other Side from 2014, both National Book Critics Circle Award finalists, and the memoir, Trespasses from 2012. Her writings appeared in the Best American Essays, Best American Travel Writing, The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Los Angeles Times, Paris Review, Virginia Quarterly Review, Tin House, Guernica, and elsewhere. Born in Iowa and raised in rural Missouri, Johnson worked as a cashier at Walmart, sold steaks door to door, and puppeteered with a traveling children's museum before earning a PhD in literature and creative writing from University of Houston. She teaches creative nonfiction at Rice University and is a current Guggenheim Fellow. She is the founding director of the Houston Flood Museum. Francesca Sloane. Francesca was raised between Philadelphia and El Salvador. She's currently writing on the newest season of Atlanta from FX. Francesca is co-creating a series on Netflix as well as developing a project with Legendary. Prior to Fargo, which was on FX, she developed a series at Apple and worked on set writing with Bo Willimon on The First, which is on Hulu, and starred Sean Penn. Francesca began her writing career on the staff of Vina Sude's 7 Seconds from Netflix and Startup on Crackle. She'll be making a directorial feature debut on Headbangers, which was recently recognized by the Sundance Screenwriters Intensive 2020, as well as Blacklist and NALIP on their inaugural list of Best Unproduced Latinx Screenplays. After graduating from the film and video program at Cal Arts, Francesca traveled the globe shooting experimental political video art before getting her master's in screenwriting from UCLA. Francesca enjoys finding beauty in the specific and the mundane and considers herself well-suited for the one job that encourages daydreaming at work, writing. She lives with her 2 big dogs, Billy and Lucy, and her fiance, Brandon. Danez Smith.
Hey.
Is a Black queer pause writer and performer for St. Paul, Minnesota. Danez is the author of Don't Call Us Dead from Grey Wolf Press in 2017, winner of the Forward Prize for the Best Collection, the Midwest Booksellers' Choice Award, and a finalist for the National Book Award. They also wrote Insert Boy from Yes Yes Books in 2014, winner of the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry. They are the recipient of fellowships from the Poetry Foundation, the McKnight Foundation, the Montalvo Arts Center, Cave Canem, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Danez's work has been featured widely, appearing on platforms such as BuzzFeed, the New York Times, PBS NewsHour, Best American Poetry, Poetry Magazine, and On the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Danez is a member of the Dark Noise Collective and is co-host of Verses with Franny Choi, the podcast sponsored by the Poetry Foundation and Post Loudness. Danez's 3rd collection, Homie, was published by Grey Wolf in January 2020. So I know that none of us can hear it, but I hope out there you're giving all of our panelists a hand for being here. So everyone who knows, just so you guys kind of know what to expect, what we're going to do is we're going to have a reading from everyone, a brief reading. Then we're going to get into sort of the discussion of the topic at hand, and then we'll have time for the questions at the end. So why don't we just go reading-wise in the order in which I said the bios. So Serena, if you'd like to go first.
Sure thing. All right, I'm going to be reading from a new manuscript, Dayavati of Mercy, which is a a manuscript that explores epigenetic trauma, specifically related to domestic violence and abuse. The project begins with my grandmother, who was married at 14 in Patiala, Punjab in India. And she was abused by my grandfather and her mother-in-law, beaten with ropes to the point of deafness, and many other traumas. The manuscript also follows my father's witnessing of these traumas and the ways in which perhaps that violence immigrated with him across the world to America and into our own home. And so it explores the ways that trauma and abuse and violence travels. What I'll be reading for you today is a few poems focused mostly on my grandmother, Dayavati, whose name means in Hindi, of mercy. So 3 poems from this sequence. The first one is called Seduction After Fossil Beds. A poem isn't composed of words, just as the prairie isn't composed of bones, crickets. Just as inhabiting me, she might be nerves, fluorescent, exceptionally preserved in mudstone, paper shales. Who is our state flower and who turned this land construction site, the melodrama's echoing peaks? Skin the getting out, skin the lips as if at their blooming, language fossilized, preserved in the fall and swoon of volcanic ash and algae, diadem, her nervous cry, her nerving edge, her edge of suffering skin, leaves my mind vanishing an entire ecosystem we name the world's first roses. This next poem is untitled. There is a ghost muscle that is water. There is her rage there, the challenge of lifting her to our lips, of letting her act upon our cells. What is trust? What are the lag lines of an evaporated spill? What kind of map of absence of accident when the bruise refuses to show? Where the fist kiss, oh, bring me the contemplation of cells shocked, the halt in the ripening of senses. To know each hair stitched to your skull, to collect those fallen into a bun, to pin where your spine insists your head to buoy despite the sinking, to drain your sight of. And the final piece is called Invasive Species. Father pulls at the prairie, tearing her at the roots. I help, but not out of his weedy frustration. I collect her in vases, fanning her neatly in our windows, prairie staged for prairie witness. Read her reflection in the window like a palm. She whispers, the depletion spreading like moonlight, her ghost submerged beneath our lawn. Father shows me how to spade and pull from the root, but her breezy flowers, fiery grass, fine grains swell in the earth, tuber thick, muscling root leathers in clay, and clay is a firm fist. And anyway, prairie roots crowd angry in vases, gripping their clay fists, claiming the water metallic, rusting with grief and mute as blood. Between her and hers is a word on the tip of my tongue, of blemish, of guilt, of fault, an extended break in the body. The lawn ironed horizon of extinction, of cutaneous erosion. The grasses stilled in their ghosts. I cut the roots. Father cautions me against discarding them in our flower beds. Invasive species are insistent. In vases, the prairie smells of drowned air, calcifies the glass, rots overnight and insists we scry the effluvium for our morning prayer. Withered stamen, balding ovaries, how do her petals withstand fists of storm and wind? I remove the death and change the water, unable to discern her kind of thirsting. Thank you.
Thank you, Serena. I appreciate that. Okay, Lacy, are you ready to do a reading?
I am, and I think I'm gonna break protocol if that's okay. And I'm actually
Rule
not.
breaker.
I'm not gonna read my own work.
Okay.
I'm gonna read actually someone else's work because I think my voice is not the one that's right for this moment.
Okay.
So I'm gonna read. So I have actually in my latest essay collection, at the end of the collection, there's an essay called Make Way for Joy, which to me is about sort of what justice looks like. And I think that idea was informed by the work of Black feminists. And I want to read just this tiny bit from a book called Pleasure Activism, which is by Adrienne Marie Brown. And I recommend everyone buy this book. Is that okay? Yeah, okay, good. So she says, what is pleasure activism? Pleasure is a feeling of happy satisfaction and enjoyment. Activism consists of efforts to promote, impede, or direct social, political, economic, or environmental reform or stasis with the desire to make improvements in society. Pleasure activism is the work we do to reclaim our whole, happy, and satisfiable selves from the impacts, delusions, and limitations of oppression and/or supremacy. Pleasure activism asserts that we all need and deserve pleasure, and that our social structures must reflect this. In this moment, we must prioritize the pleasure of those most impacted by oppression. Pleasure activists seek to understand and learn from the politics and power dynamics inside of everything that makes us feel good. This includes sex and the erotic, drugs, fashion, humor, passion work, connection, reading, cooking, and/or eating, music, and other arts, and so much more. Pleasure activists believe that by tapping into the potential goodness in each of us, we can generate justice and liberation, growing a healing abundance where we have been socialized to believe only scarcity exists. Pleasure activism acts from an analysis that pleasure is a natural, safe, and liberated part of life, and that we can offer each other tools and education to make sure sex, desire, drugs, connection, and other pleasures aren't life-threatening or harming, but life-enriching. Pleasure activism includes work and life lived in the realms of satisfaction, joy, and erotic aliveness that bring about social and political change. Ultimately, pleasure activism is us learning to make justice and liberation the most pleasurable experiences we can have on this planet. Thank you, Adrienne Marie Brown.
Right on. All right, Francesca, are you ready to share something?
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
I appreciate what both of you already offered just now. I really do. It's time for a change. We won't tolerate anything else at this point. So I think, so I'm gonna read from a television show, an original called Tuesdays. The concept is Tuesday in many different cities, featuring low families that live in low income neighborhoods. So it would feature a different, basically a short of a Tuesday of a different family per episode. So this is one episode that is of a single mother and her daughter, teenage daughter, and then her little boy. This is a scene with the little boy. It's weird to read a screenplay like this, but I'm gonna give it my best shot. Okay, so interior school gymnasium day. Nino taps Anila on the shoulder. She turns to her left, he darts for her right. He taps her right shoulder, she turns and he darts for her left. She sheepishly smiles. Anila, stop. Behind them, a giant rainbow-colored parachute fills the majority of the room. Triangular quilted strips divided by blue, yellow, green, and red. The entire group grips the edges of the parachute with their little fingers. Coach Rossi, Nino, Anila, I need you over here to join us. They obey. Anila stands across from Nino, both of their fists tight around patches of blue. Nino picks at his earwax with one hand, looks down at the residue on his pointer finger, discreetly smells it before wiping it away on his t-shirt. Anila pretends not to notice. Coach Rossi, okay, I want everyone to lift the parachute up high above our heads, holding it tight. Everyone follows directions. The parachute picks up air and bellows above them like a jellyfish. And we're gonna make what I like to call a floating mushroom. On the count of 3, everyone let go of the parachute and stand back. Everyone looks up at the floating fabric above their heads. 1, 2, 3. An eruption of laughter as the students release the parachute and watch it hang in the air, bellowing indeed like the shape of an oversized mushroom, until it gently loses speed and gracefully falls back down to the ground. Everyone grab an edge again and spread out. I want you all to lift the parachute up over our head like we did before. They do. But this time, we're going to drape the parachute around our necks. Now let us pull our bellies down to the floor, pulling the parachute down with us. Suddenly, the class is inside the belly of the parachute, primary colors reflecting on all of their silly, smiling faces, their stomachs pressed down on the gym floor. The parachute clutched around only 5th grade heads, all of them unable to move otherwise, as if they're floating, hysterically cackling at the sensation of being in a rainbow womb all together. Nick, what if I farted right now? Giggles. Across from Nino is his blossoming crush, Anila, her chin lightly resting on the floor, such intensity between them, their heads stuck in place from across one another, forced to stare directly at each other, such intimacy for such children. Anila's mouth opens wide, almost slow motion, her eyes close as if in a trance, her head leans back, locked in position, and she sneezes, unable to cover her mouth or move her hands at all for that matter. Specks of spit fly forward. Nino is the only one to notice, and he smiles, sort of this kindred spirit of nasty between them. But then, a second sneeze from Anila, and this time out flies a hanging green snot, the perfect replica of a lima bean, peeking from her right nostril. She tries to suck it back in, makes it worse, no luck. It quivers up and down as she breathes. Nino, trapped in place, his eyes wanting to look away, but something about it can't. He just stares at this juicy booger for what feels like eternity, disgust and intrigue growing by the second. He didn't know girls had boogers like this. Anila curves her face up towards the fabric of the parachute and rubs the nose slime against the translucent red, until finally, Nino can't take it anymore. He squeezes his lids shut to avoid any more of this nightmare image. That's it.
Thank you, Francesca. I feel like if we have a subtitle for this salon, it can be Juicy Booger now. All right, Danez, you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you for that, everybody. I love pleasure activism too, Laci. So I'm glad you read from that book. And I really relate to Nino. When I was a child, I thought girls didn't poop. And I thought everyone pooped their skin color. Because it made sense to me. Mine was brown. And like, I was very confused when I went over to my white friend's house and he forgot to flush. And I was like, what? What's going on? Okay, I'm just gonna read one poem and then we can get some discussion. I need to write about that. Alex's brown little poop. All right. Okay. This poem is about trees. It's called Trees. Y'all, they look like slow green explosions, thick as the best fro in the click, a click of them, a whole hood of soft jade, stadium of limes, how they look, gathered at the roots and at the leaves. Woo! I'm a little bit beside myself. Driving through Mississippi with Tish, who is indeed a part of myself. She say, I wish I could take a picture of all this green, but it's raining, so we can't step out to photograph these perfect emerald lungs, these giant ancient niggas. They must be niggas, right? How brown and giving they are, their fruit cousin to our hands, their flowers, our songs. I wonder if I went like a year without lotion, if my skin would dry into bark and naps would drink the day as my toes kinked with thirst. Do you think that's how the first trees were invented? A bunch of niggas stood still in a field, waiting for a sign from an older god, their breath a prayer until breath was their only action. If I could be a tree, I know God is real. If I could be a tree, there'd be a heart knifed into me that read, I heart all my niggas. If I could stand still in a field with Tish and Blair and Josh and Jamila and Cam and Aaron and Nate and Angel and Morgan and Brittany and Kelsey and Krista and Deallan and Camilla and Dorian and Tahira and Nabila and Safia and Courtney and Jason and Philip and Lamar and Hanif and Eve and Chris and Dom and Saeed and Brandon and Amber and Adora and Brittany and Shanaka and James and Leland and DeBray and D'Angelo and all the niggas whose names burst my heart to joyful smithereens with their bright seeds, I would be the happiest tree. I'd let all the birds live in me, glad to breathe in that constellation of green budding stars. Oh my God, of Negroes in foliage, roots and roots and roots. Here we are, black and ashy and filtering air, ready to be the forest, deliver us into an axeless world, sweet mother of chlorophyll and melanin, branch and braid, dogwood and all my dogs. We stand, waiting to be made evergreen. We see your promise in the noon star, hear your word in the rain.
Right on. Thank you, Danez.
Thank you.
All right, so look, everyone here is a writer whose work finds its life in different disciplines, from print to performing, which I just think is a cool thing that everybody's expressing in these different ways. I think we can all agree that things are real right now, just out in the world. So one of the questions I want to start with is, when real life makes its way into our work, directly or indirectly, what is the difference between that and just documentary for you guys? Like, how does that real life mix with your imagination to create something that is your own distinct voice? That was a hard one. How about I start with me? I'll say that, like, for me, with that kind of thing, there's a theme that I want to communicate often in my writing, and taking real life events and mixing them with that theme sort of creates its own entity. So it doesn't end up being just like, like me taking down the details of something that happened. Sometimes it's more important that the events in the story reflect the theme of what I'm trying to communicate, whether humanity, whether social justice, something with political stand, whatever it is, How are you guys finding real life falling into your writing and influencing what you're doing?
I can sort of also respond to that. I mean, I teach a class called documentary poetry, and one of the questions we ask in the class is, what does poetry as the genre offer to the documentary art? And I think particularly for me, poetry as a genre offers a kind of meditation and affirmation of resonance. So it's not just about what happened, it's about how it happened and how it happened in context with everything else that happened. So it's an entire system of narrative, rather than just focusing on sort of this linear of like what happened, when, who was there, but also these this resonance of details, but also resonance of reflections and observations to create an entire sort of ecosystem of whatever is being documented.
Yeah, right on. Did I hear? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think for me, real life is always sort of interacting with the work. I think most of my work either is like dealing with things that have happened in the real world or embraces confessionalism in some way. And I think one of the things I have to find freeing, and I think a lot of I learned this from memoirists, was just sort of the fiction of your real life anyway. And sort of once it is memory, once we're writing it, there already is a process of imagination that we bring back to that. You know, I cannot completely rebuild the scene that happened at the kitchen when I was 5. But I can get that, but hopefully I can get the feeling right.
Right.
And I can invent around that. And I think that is a freedom that I feel when it is like sort of, you know, when it is the real life, you do have to sort of take certain liberties about what you need to be true. Does it need to be factually true, emotionally true, you know, lyrically true, whatever it has to be. I think for me in poetry, that sort of shifts a little bit. And I can tell when like my poem, I'm like, oh yeah, lines like 4 through 7 about me, lines 8 through 9, invention as fuck, but the feeling was right.
Right.
You know, and I think maybe that's what's different about from like documentary too. When I think about documentary, I always like the immediate thing that kind of pops into my head was like sort of the like moment in the documentary, at least for like white dudes who are making it, I'm like he like is like too close, right? Emotional about it, and I had to like take a moment and cry. And I think that's the thing with real life is that you never have the privilege of finding yourself too close to it because you've always been within it. So there is no sort of looking up and being like, oh my God, now it's real. Or, oh my God, now I am implicated. When you're writing real life in that way, I think especially with poetry, I always ask my students, even when it's other people's real life, where are you? Even if your body is not going to be present in the work, how are you implicated? How is your lens as much a character or as much an influence in how that story is going as opposed to what's going on? I think one of the most dangerous things I think we can do as writers is only be onlookers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, if we're just sort of this blank lens. And you can kind of tell, you know, across any genres, you know, from filmmaking to everything, you can tell the writers, the directors, everybody who's bringing their body into the work and knows that they too, as sort of the person that's watching and arranging and curating that vision for our minds, that they are also implicated in that they are real and tangible.
I agree with a lot of what's being said here. I feel like as a writer, you have to be generous. Otherwise, do something else. You know, and being generous, you have to sort of give a piece of yourself, and sometimes it's in more profound ways. Sometimes it's about a booger. I think in terms of screenwriting, especially for a very long time, when I had gone years and years and years ago for undergrad to Cal Arts, it's very much an anti-narrative sort of education in terms of film and video. So screenwriting for television was never something that I thought I would end up doing. I think that activism through entertainment is really powerful, but it also has the potential to be really dangerous if you're not very thoughtful. And I'm finally at a place now where I feel like the projects that I find, you know, there's a moment where you have to pay the bills and you have to, but there's a moment where you can finally start saying yes to the other people that also are thoughtful. And you're outputting thoughtful material based on experiences, even if they are sort of fictionalized versions of those experiences. So those are the only projects that I will ever say yes to ever again. Nice. Yeah.
Oh, please go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, you know, because my work is nonfiction, so a lot of it is already quite documentary in nature. But to me, I think it's rather than just sort of taking everything that's here and showing it again, I think the challenge or the task is sort of being clear about what about this representation of the world do I want? Does like this allow you to see? Or what does showing you this allow us to see or understand about how the world works, how power works, how we relate to one another? And so that has to do a lot with just, you know, your voice and the questions that you bring to, you know, to the world, but sort of also how you bring the world, I guess, to the page is sort of what are your investments, where are your allegiances, what are you trying to break down or undo or build in its place, you know?
Right. Huh. Well, Danez, something that you said really stood out to me, just about not being this sort of impartial lens. And, you know, there's so many writers who both in fiction and nonfiction are trying to find their voice. But it seems that what you said is very key to just growing into your voice by just bringing yourself, not trying to lean on a writing style or, you know, that's really powerful. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just thinking like one of the biggest breakthroughs in my like writing life was realizing I could be my whole self in a poem. Like if I do say so, I'm a funny motherfucker. And I felt so uncomfortable like bringing humor into the work. And when I finally figured out, I was like, you know what, I can be funny, even if it's only funny to me, and I can at least try. And it just made the poem so much fuller and funner to write, to feel like I wasn't having to even like stop up a mood I was in to try to write a poem, because a poem was a rather serious thing at the time. You know what, like I can like talk about how my lover just like farted on my dick, like, you know, and I can like do all, you know, I can bring all that sort of like what feels irreverent or like sometimes silly or very unserious for a poem into it too. And just like having that fullness of voice was just like, yeah, like I can have a personality. I don't have to sort of sound like a writer. I can sound like me.
Right. Francesca, I want to say I take issue with the idea that Juicy Booger can't be profound. So listen, you know, we're talking about bringing aspects of real life into our work. Is it more important to you all as writers to get the accuracy of the events correct, or to get the heart of the event, like what the significance, the emotional connection, which is more important to you in your own writing?
For me, I always like to remind myself that there is no singular truth and there is no singular authority on truth in any given scene or event that has happened. So I think that Danez has spoken to this already, but getting sort of the sensation, the atmosphere, the sort of coloring and the of the scene or of the event is what's most important to me. The sort of filter that I was experiencing it through, how can I replicate that? And that being in and of itself my truth. So I think there's also a moment when you have to recognize that, of course, there are going to be other truths to this story. But what is the one that you know? What is the one that you connect to? What is the one that you can write, that you know to write and that you're driven to write? I mean, even a single person can have multiple truths of their own on an event, right? And they can be contradictory as well, which is also another amazing thing I also like to, you know, try to bring out in my writing is looking at my truths and recognizing the ways in which the multiplicity of them agree, but also come into tension and contradiction with each other. And I think that that's a really human experience. And so to translate that is really important for me.
So I want to say, Jenna, I know you're in the background here. I can't see any audience questions. So if you want to send them to me in chat, I'll be able to grab them from there. So when we are sort of weaving our experiences into it, I guess for me, you know, I just want to know like what feels complete or successful to you? What feels like a true or accurate or valid thing? Like when you're at the end of writing something, are you measuring it by what your experiences are? Are you measuring it by sort of what your internal goals are for the piece?
I think it's just like, at the end of the day, it's like reading someone else's book. It's like, does this shit move me?
Right.
You know, and I think it has to be that balance for me. Writing, especially in drafts, is this sort of like agreeance between like structure and improvisation, trying to sort of march, you know, whether it be a poem or a manuscript or an essay, whatever it may be, a play forward in a way that like I plot it out, but leaving enough space for that surprise, right? Leaving enough space to sort of look up and say, oh, fuck, who wrote that?
Right.
Like, you know, just between that, like, you know, that organizing self and that unknown self that we have as writers that are sort of in battle and in partnership. And so when I, like, you know, I get to the piece, especially, you know, pieces sometimes, you know, I love when the writer gets to say that one got away from me, you know, or I just didn't know it was going to go there, or the character took off and started doing something that I didn't know they were going to do. So that's it, you know, like, even if it moves away from maybe my goals or even like a factual truth, does it move me? You know, does it make me laugh, cry, feel something in my gut? That's what I'm looking for. You know, is there a physical response? Does it have some duende endued in it? Does it, you know, does it something in me? Yeah.
I completely agree. It's interesting because I did another one of sort of an interview thing with Manuel yesterday. Was it yesterday? I don't know time anymore, but I said such a similar thing to you. I feel like we live in such a rightfully cynical world in so many ways, but one thing that is true is authenticity does come through, and you feel it in every medium. And as long as you are doing that in a way, like you're saying, if it moves you, that's the only measurement, you know. That's the only, there are no rules. But like, I feel like even if it's like the most profound song you've ever heard, if it's a Nina Simone song, you know if that shit moves you because it moved her. Or if it's like some bad SoCal surfer guy talking, you know, singing some kind of pop song about, you know, skateboarding with his buddies on a Sunday afternoon, but that brings him joy. You feel that shit too. I think you can apply that to your writing as well. You can apply that really to anything. And that's the one thing we have left in this world, is we still can detect authenticity in each other, in our work. So that's one beautiful thing we still have going for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That just made me feel inspired. I just want to say that.
Oh, great.
It's fantastic. I think, you know, I mean, in my work, I like, these are real questions that I have and real things that I'm trying to figure out. And so if I haven't figured out anything, then I know my reader's not going to either. And so like, once I get to the end, it's like, have I answered my own questions? Have I, you know, figured out what about this thing bothers me and been able to turn it over so I can see, you know, these questions in a different way, right?
Yeah.
You know.
All right, so we got did somebody want to say something?
No, it's my son.
Hello, son. All right, got an audience question here. See, here's one. Do you ever find yourself watering down experiences and emotion in writing? And how do you catch and stop yourself from doing that?
When I feel scared. Right? If I stop feeling scared, then I know I'm not telling the truth.
Oh, wow. That's good. All right. I thought that these mighty pauses were just because my questions were so good, but okay. I see we have the reaction to other people. Here's another one. How do you balance your emotional truth with urgent calls for justice and change at the larger societal level?
How do you balance your emotional truth with
urgent calls for justice and change? I think if I might presume to phrase the person's question, is basically how are we balancing what's true to us as a writer with what we want to include, whether there's like a theme for social justice or call for something higher. How are we being authentic while carrying those messages that we believe forward?
Right. I think you have to really fight not making actual calls for justice trendy and like themes in your writing, right? Sharing work is hella important, right? If you know damn well that you ain't got no business writing about no prison abolition or no like anti-racist shit because you ain't got the skills, just share with somebody who does. There are people out there doing that work. They're good at it. You know, like, and I think that could be such a good, it's great to amplify other shit, you know? But, you know, stay true to your emotional stuff. You know, we're still gonna need poems about the grandmas. We still gonna need motherfuckers writing about the moon. We still, we're still gonna need fantasy. We're still gonna need, other worlds to escape to. We're gonna need all that. We still need stories about our childhood. It's not like in these moments, sort of who else we are as people vanish. But it could be a time to think about how you lean your network and your resources into those calls for justice. Maybe there is, like, if you do need to do some more thinking, maybe there is like a way that you can not rush into it and write and like actually like do some like thoughtful thinking towards these things if you feel called for it, to work there, work towards that. Yeah, and I think like if you do feel like called to like do some justicey shit and like feel caught in the ways of publishing, I think like, utilize shit like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and your own website and stuff like that. I can think of times when stuff was really urgent for me and I didn't have time to wait for a literary magazine to tell me 6 months if they liked the poem or not to put it up on their website. And so I found other avenues, quicker ones. I can just self-publish some shit. Just be like, look, y'all, it feels urgent to me. I'm sharing it with you right now. Here's a link to it through whatever. And that also can kind of feel like, when the personal is political, when you do feel like something is actually stopping up in you because of that urgency. Think about how we can escape sort of the like trappings of publication, of the journal, of the pitch, of the book, and sort of add fuel to the flame when the fuel is needed.
Yeah, and just like Francesca was saying, it's like if it's not authentic to you, like people are gonna know. So if you feel called to write about social justicey shit, as Danez was saying, to use this term, like, and that's not like something that actually matters to you, like maybe you need to ask yourself what that's about, right? And because everybody's gonna see it and gonna know, right, that it's not authentic, that it's a performance, and nobody needs any performances right now.
Real.
Yeah, to sort of bounce off of that, I think something that I always like to remind folks is that if you start with your narrative, if you start with what is true to you and what is actual to you, then those sort of larger politics, those are going to be inherently inside of that. And so you don't have to go fundamentally right to the justice, right to the peace, right to those larger abstract statements. If you start inside of your body and inside of your sensory experience, all of those things are going to just elevate from that.
I'll add to that, Serena, that I think if we are following the principles of good writing, particularly like say like in fiction or something where we're creating a character and the character is not defined by one thing, they are a well-rounded character that has complex emotions and viewpoints, that makes it harder for us to just have somebody who is just our mouthpiece to spout off everything we believe in. So that sort of protects the quality of what it is that we're trying to write. Let's see, we have another one. Let me just check in here. All right. How do you each balance expressing yourself in a way that feels true to you and making your work accessible to folks who might not have your background or MFA or be well-versed in your genre? So how do you make it accessible to everyone, I guess, is more or less the question.
Don't. Take it away.
There you go.
That's it. Never do that, in my opinion. Even as a TV writer, never. I'm saying that, and I don't do that personally. Right on.
Yeah, and like every like writer craft talk that I've ever given, I always would find a way to sneak in a slide that says the universal is a lie. And so there's no way to write for everybody, right? By writing in a language, you've already made a very political decision to speak to those people, So, yeah, like let people be lost, figure out who your most beloved and urgent audience is and speak to them. And if you're doing that right, then other people will fall in.
I also like to think about the ways in which reading is like a divinatory practice, right? And I get this from Sela Sederstrom's book, Ideal Suggestions, Essays in Divinatory Poetics. But I do believe that experiencing a text will always reveal itself to the person in what they need to hear from the text. So for you to sort of try to cater what they should hear from it is not really an accurate experience of how a text should be experienced, right? An accurate assessment of how the text should be experienced. Like I think one of, like if we're thinking about really great novels, I particularly love novels by Virginia Woolf, right? Every time I enter into this one of her books, I get a new experience. I get something new out of it. And it is whatever I need to hear or see of myself at the time, I can see that inside of the text. So acts in that way as kind of a continuous and ever evolving conversation. So to limit as a writer what it is to a particular audience, you're really just limiting the life force of the text itself.
Right. There's that quote by Anais Nin. I've never heard her name said aloud. I've only read it. Thank you. Anais Nin. But the quote is, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And I think the key thing when you're looking at audiences, if you're trying to predict how an audience is going to react to what you write, you are creating sort of this weird, this unreliable mandate on your writing that is going to limit what you're able to do, because everybody's going to bring their own experiences to it.
Right. And it also creates like a funhouse mirror, right? Because you can't possibly know or predict how anybody is going to react. Like, even if you're like, I have this one person in mind and this is what I want them to think and do and understand from this thing, like you can't actually control that at all. And to believe that you can, it's like, it's just projecting your own self in this sort of funhouse warped way onto that other person.
Yes, I agree. And I just got so excited because that's like my project right now. One of the shows that I'm developing is a collection of all of her works and turning it into this contemporary show. So I have been so immersed in that language right now. But one thing that I love about her, there are many things, but one of them is she understood the fact that we are all many fragments. And because of that, we are then sort of connected to each other because of that. So if you I'm repeating things that everybody said far more articulately and beautifully than I will right now, but just write something that moves you. Close your ears, close your eyes, and shut out the rest of it. And that's the only way to do it, really.
Okay, well, so look, we are 6 minutes away. So this would be the time for anyone to share kind of what you're working on that you want people to look out for. And if you desire people to follow you on social media or go to a website or anything like that, this is the time for that. So who wants to shout out what they have coming?
I ain't got shit.
Right on. Somebody do it.
All my stuff's already out there right now. Sorry.
Okay, I'm just gonna call on people. How about that? Does that make anybody nervous? Because I won't do it. All right, we're gonna start with Danez.
For what? I ain't got none.
Oh, I thought you said I got shit. You said I ain't got shit.
I ain't got shit. No, I have not a thing.
You have a new book out. Come on.
It came out. Yeah, if you don't have Homie, get it. I would like to pay rent while I'm off tour. And let's see. What do I have going? I don't know. Go to my Twitter and like look for like the good stuff, not the jokes and the stuff about like sex and my boo. But like, if I'm sharing any like calls to action or ask for donations and stuff like that for different orgs, like retweet that. That's all I ask. That's what I got coming up.
Right on.
Yeah.
Also, books and everything, they were listed in the chat too. So if anyone's feeling shy about speaking particularly on something they're working on, then you don't have to now. It's in the chat. Look at that. It's all solved.
What are you working on, Alan?
Oh, I ain't got shit. I'm just kidding. I was just inspired by Danez. All right. So I actually did have a graphic novel in process called Anguish Garden, which is an allegory for living white supremacy. It's a post-apocalyptic Western. I kickstarted it. And my agent is pitching a book on Barney Ford, who nobody knows, right? So I'll tell you really quickly. Barney Ford escaped slavery, came to Colorado. He was one of the first people to discover gold and worked his way up and became a millionaire. Became so powerful that when Colorado wanted to become a state, he obstructed it until they removed the racist voting laws. And I just don't know why we don't know about him. So I'm about to do a graphic novel about that dude. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for having this good conversation. Thank you for reading. It's been good, and yeah, and thank everybody who's who we can't see for submitting your questions and listening in. I really appreciate it. We got 3 minutes, and I just did like the final big thank you to everybody. Look at that. It's perfect timing. Not really. Okay, so there were 90 people attending. Just so you guys all know.
Thank you,
yeah,
Mac.
so right. Thank you, Magic 90 on Facebook for keeping it alive. All right. I will say, we will all say goodbye now. Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Good night.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye.